The unexpected visit. The morning sun was soft over the quiet neighborhood, spilling warm light across the manicured lawns and peaceful streets. SundarPichai stood near the large glass window of his home, sipping his tea slowly, lost in quiet thought. His house was calm. His children were preparing for their day, and his wife was arranging the breakfast table with her usual graceful rhythm. Everything felt ordinary, almost too ordinary. He didn't yet know that this day would become one of the most unforgettable moments for his family. Just as Sundar set down his cup, his phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. It was brief but powerful. "Sir, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar will visit your home today at noon. Private and informal." For a moment, Sundar's heart skipped. It wasn't common for someone of Jaishankar's stature to visit a private residence casually. The relationship between them had always been respectful and warm, but a visit to his home, especially with his family present, carried a different weight. This wasn't just a professional interaction, it was personal. He immediately gathered his family in the living room. His wife looked surprised. His teenage daughter raised her eyebrows with curiosity, and his son looked both excited and nervous. "Listen," Sundar began, keeping his tone calm but firm. "Minister Jaishankar will be visiting us today. This is not a formal event, but we must show him the respect and warmth our family is known for. I want you to be yourselves, but remember the value of humility. This moment is special." His wife nodded with a gentle smile. She understood these things instinctively. She had grown used to high-profile visitors over the years, but this was different. Jaishankar wasn't a celebrity or a business partner. He was someone who represented the nation, someone who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes to uphold India's image in the world. Their children, though born into a world of privilege, had been raised with simple values. Sundar often reminded them that respect wasn't about wealth or power, but about the way one made others feel. As the hours passed, preparations began quietly. Flowers were arranged in the living room. The dining table was set with a mixture of traditional Indian elements and simple elegance. Sundar didn't want to make it look like a formal diplomatic reception. He wanted Jaishankar to feel the warmth of a home, not the stiffness of a boardroom. He walked through the house, checking every detail, but deep down a quiet nervousness grew. This was not just about hosting an important guest. It was about representing his family's values in front of someone he deeply respected. Around noon, a black car approached the gate. Security teams moved with practiced precision, but everything was kept low profile. Sundar walked to the entrance with his wife, his children following closely behind. As the car door opened, Jaishankar stepped out with a calm smile. There was no entourage of journalists, no flashing cameras, just the sound of birds and the gentle rustle of leaves. Sundar folded his hands in a respectful namaste, and Jaishankar responded warmly, his eyes reflecting genuine kindness. As they entered the house, something unexpected happened. Jaishankar paused near the entrance and turned towards Sundar's daughter, who had been quietly standing beside her mother. She was wearing a simple dress, holding a tray with flowers and water, as part of the family's traditional welcome. Jaishankar smiled and said softly, "You remind me of my own daughter when she was your age. Thank you for welcoming me so beautifully." His words carried a sincerity that made the moment feel personal. Inside, the conversation flowed naturally. Jaishankar wasn't there to talk politics or business. He asked about Sundar's family life, his children's education, his wife's interests. He admired the artwork on the walls and shared small stories from his travels. What surprised Sundar the most was how effortlessly the minister connected with everyone. His daughter, usually shy around strangers, began asking him questions about his diplomatic journeys, and he answered each one with patience and warmth. His son listened with fascination as Jaishankar spoke about the importance of humility, even when one represents power. Then, just when the atmosphere had grown comfortable and full of warmth, a sudden interruption occurred. One of the staff members hurried into the room, whispering something into Sundar's ear. Sundar's expression shifted subtly. Something was wrong. He excused himself politely and stepped out into the hallway. His assistant had called to inform him that a group of reporters had somehow learned of the minister's visit and were gathering outside the gate. The visit was supposed to be private. If the media stormed in, it could disrupt the peaceful tone of the meeting and potentially create unwanted headlines. Sundar returned to the living room with a composed face, but inside, his mind raced. He didn't want Jaishankar to feel uncomfortable, and he didn't want his family to get caught in an awkward situation. He quickly signaled his security team to handle the situation quietly. but the distant sound of murmuring voices outside grew louder. Jaishankar noticed the shift. His calm eyes met Sundar's, and for a moment no words were needed. Instead of reacting with frustration or pulling back, Jaishankar simply smiled and said softly, "Don't worry. These things happen. Let us continue." His composure was remarkable. Rather than letting the outside world dictate the moment, he brought the focus back to the human connection inside the house. Sundar felt a wave of respect rise within him. This was a man who carried great power, yet his presence brought calm instead of tension. As lunch was served, the conversation deepened. Jaishankar spoke about resilience, how diplomacy often demanded patience, respect, and humility even in difficult situations. He shared an emotional story about a time when he represented India during a tense negotiation, where simple gestures of respect had changed the tone of the entire meeting. Sundar's wife listened intently, her eyes reflecting admiration. His children absorbed every word, realizing they were witnessing something rare. A conversation between two individuals who carried the weight of leadership in different ways, yet shared the same core values. But just when everything felt harmonious, a sudden knock echoed through the hallway. It wasn't from the media. It was from someone unexpected. A figure stood at the door, hesitant yet determined. Sundar's assistant whispered urgently in his ear, "Sir, it's someone from your past. They insist on speaking with you right now. They say it's urgent." Sundar's heart tightened. He wasn't expecting anyone else. Who could it be and why now? As he walked slowly toward the door, Jaishankar and the family watched curiously. Sundar's mind raced through possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. He reached for the handle, unsure of what awaited on the other side. The door opened and his face froze, not out of fear but out of shock. The person standing there carried the weight of unresolved history. And their arrival, in the middle of such an important visit, was about to change the tone of the day completely. The warmth of the moment lingered in the air, but beneath it, a new layer of tension began to form, setting the stage for something far deeper and more personal than anyone inside had expected. The guest from the past, the air near the doorway felt different, heavier, as Sundar looked into the eyes of the unexpected visitor. Standing there was Arun, a man from his college days, someone who had once been both a friend and a silent rival. Time had left its mark on him. His face carried lines of hardship. His clothes were simple and worn, and there was a quiet determination in his eyes that seemed to pierce through the polished world around Sundar's home. Sundar hadn't seen him in years, not since their paths had diverged so dramatically, one leading to global recognition and the other into silence and obscurity. Arun's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "I'm sorry to come like this, Sundar. I know this isn't the right time, but I had no other choice. I've been trying to reach you for months." His words were soft, but they carried urgency. Sundar's mind flooded with old memories. Nights spent working on projects together, shared dreams, and then that silent fracture between them when life had pulled them in different directions. He hadn't imagined they would meet again like this at his doorstep during such a significant visit. Inside the living room, Jaishankar and Sundar's family exchanged curious glances. Sundar hesitated for a moment, torn between his role as host and the sudden pull of the past. Finally, he stepped aside and motioned for Arun to come in. "Please," he said quietly, "let's talk inside." Jaishankar, sensing the delicate nature of the moment, nodded gently, signaling his understanding without intruding. His calm presence seemed to give Sundar silent permission to handle this his way. As Arun entered, his eyes moved slowly across the elegant living room. It wasn't envy that flickered in his gaze, but something more complex, perhaps a mix of nostalgia and disbelief. Sundar guided him toward a quieter corner of the house away from the main table, while his wife gently distracted their children with small tasks. Jaishankar remained seated, his hands folded, watching with quiet interest but never overstepping the boundaries of the family's private moment. Once they were alone, Arun took a deep breath. "I know this is unexpected," he began, "but I've been carrying this for too long. After college, things didn't go well for me. I made some bad choices, trusted the wrong people. I tried building my own company, but it collapsed. Debts piled up, and honestly, I lost everything. I reached out to a few people, but doors kept closing." He paused, his voice cracking slightly. "I remembered you. I remembered the promises we made back then, about never letting each other fall behind. I didn't come for pity, Sundar. I came for a chance to stand again." The words hit Sundar like a wave. Buried deep within his busy life, he had almost forgotten the bond they once shared. Their friendship had been built on late-night ideas, shared ambition, and youthful trust. But as success had consumed Sundar's life, some connections had simply faded away, not intentionally but silently. And now one of those lost connections stood before him, vulnerable yet dignified, asking not for charity but for a moment of faith. Before Sundar could respond, a faint disturbance outside interrupted the fragile atmosphere. The murmurs of reporters had grown louder. Despite security's efforts, news had spread, and a few determined journalists were trying to get closer. The private visit was slipping toward unwanted publicity. Sundar's security team was holding them back, but tension was rising. Inside, his wife moved quickly to close a few windows to keep the noise out, but the shift in energy was undeniable. Arun noticed the unease and lowered his eyes. "I shouldn't have come today," he whispered, shame brushing across his face. "You have important people here. I'll leave." He began to rise, but Sundar placed a hand on his shoulder. "No," Sundar said softly. "You came for a reason. Maybe this moment isn't a coincidence." Jaishankar, who had been watching quietly, now stood and walked toward them with measured grace. His presence carried warmth, not authority. "Sometimes," he said in his calm, steady voice, "the moments that seem most inconvenient are the ones that reveal the most about us." His words weren't directed at anyone in particular, yet they settled deeply into Sundar's heart. Instead of sending Arun away, Sundar invited him to join them at the dining table. It was a surprising gesture that caught everyone off guard, even his children. But in that decision, Sundar silently declared that respect and kindness weren't reserved only for powerful guests. They were values meant to be lived. Jaishankar's eyes softened, clearly appreciating the choice. As lunch continued, an interesting dynamic unfolded. Jaishankar asked Arun about his life with genuine curiosity, not pity. Arun, at first hesitant, began to share his experiences, failures, lessons, and small victories. Sundar's children listened with unexpected fascination, realizing that not all stories of success follow straight paths. Sundar watched his old friend speak, noticing how time had shaped him, not into someone broken but someone tempered by experience. Yet beneath the warm conversation, Sundar's mind was racing. The reporters outside were growing impatient, and the situation could escalate at any moment. More importantly, he sensed that Arun's visit carried something deeper than a request for help. There was a layer of urgency in his eyes that hadn't fully surfaced yet. Sundar knew this wasn't just about old friendship. Something bigger was brewing. As lunch came to a close, Jaishankar suggested stepping out into the garden for tea. The atmosphere calmed for a while as birds chirped in the distance and sunlight filtered softly through the trees. But then, just as everyone settled into quiet conversation, Arun shifted uncomfortably. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled out a small, weathered envelope from his pocket. He placed it on the table between them, his eyes locking onto Sundar's. "This," Arun said slowly, his voice heavy with emotion, "is why I really came." The envelope sat there like a silent storm, its presence filling the air with tension. Jaishankar's eyes narrowed slightly, not out of suspicion but curiosity. Sundar reached out, his fingers brushing against the rough paper. Something about the weight of the moment told him that whatever was inside could change more than just the tone of the afternoon. It could reshape the meaning of the entire day. The sound of distant cameras clicking faintly echoed from beyond the gate, mixing with the gentle rustle of leaves. Inside the garden, time seemed to slow. Sundar hesitated for a heartbeat, then carefully began to open the envelope. What lay inside was not a simple letter. It was something unexpected, something that would intertwine his present, his past, and his responsibilities in a way he had never imagined. The letter that stirred the past, the paper inside the envelope, was slightly yellowed, its edges rough as if it had been carried through many uncertain journeys before reaching this moment. Sundar unfolded it slowly, his fingers moving with a mix of hesitation and curiosity. The first few lines caught his attention immediately, written in a neat but slightly faded hand. It wasn't a recent letter, it was something from years ago. As he continued reading, a heavy silence settled over the garden, broken only by the soft chirping of birds and the distant hum of traffic outside the gate. The letter was from Arun's father, dated shortly after their college graduation. It spoke of gratitude for Sundar's friendship with Arun during their student years, of dreams shared between the two young men who once stayed up late imagining a future where they would build something meaningful together. But then the tone shifted. It described a tragedy that Sundar had never known about, a business betrayal that left Arun's family in ruins. A trusted partner had cheated them, taking away their savings and property. Arun's father had written to Sundar back then, hoping to reconnect, to seek advice, to lean on a friend who was on the brink of success. But the letter had never reached him. Somewhere along the way, it was lost. Sundar felt a strange ache in his chest as he read those words. All those years he had assumed that Arun had simply chosen a different path. In reality, Arun had been struggling in silence, carrying the weight of betrayal, watching from afar as Sundar's life soared. And now, decades later, that letter had finally found its way to him, not through the postal service but through Arun's trembling hands. Arun's voice broke through the silence. "I found this letter after my father passed away. He had kept it safely all these years, believing one day it would reach you. I don't blame you, Sundar. Life takes people in different directions. But after I lost everything, I realized that this letter held the story of where things began to fall apart for me." His eyes glistened with unshed tears. "It's not about money or pity. It's about finally being seen." Sundar sat back, absorbing every word. In his world of constant meetings, global decisions, and high-stakes innovation, it was rare for something so personal and raw to break through the polished layers of his daily life. Jaishankar watched the exchange with quiet attention, his hands resting calmly on his lap. There was no judgment in his gaze, only understanding. He had seen similar human stories unfold behind diplomatic curtains, where history and emotion often walked hand in hand. "I had no idea," Sundar said finally, his voice low and heavy. "I wish I had known back then. Things could have been different." Arun gave a faint smile, one that carried both pain and relief. "I used to imagine that too," he admitted. "But over the years I realized holding on to blame would only keep me trapped. I rebuilt, failed, rebuilt again. This letter isn't about changing the past. It's about reminding both of us where we came from." Just as the emotional weight of the moment began to settle, the calm outside cracked. A sudden burst of shouting came from beyond the gate. Reporters were growing restless. Someone had leaked that Jaishankar was visiting Sundar's house, and now cameras and microphones were pressing against the barriers. The private moment they had worked so hard to protect was slipping away. Security guards moved quickly to contain the situation, but the sound carried into the garden. Sundar's children peered nervously from the balcony, watching the growing crowd. Jaishankar remained composed, his years of diplomatic experience showing in his unshaken demeanor. He leaned slightly toward Sundar and said in a measured voice, "You have a choice. You can let the noise control this day, or you can shape the narrative yourself." Those words hit Sundar deeply. His mind raced. This was supposed to be a quiet visit, a moment of shared respect between families. But now the world outside was demanding a spectacle. He could either hide behind closed doors or face the situation with dignity. And in that choice, he realized, lay not just his image, but the message his children would remember. He turned to Arun. "I won't let this moment be defined by chaos," Sundar said. "Stay here. I'll handle it." As he stepped toward the main entrance, his wife joined him, her expression steady but concerned. Jaishankar followed a few steps behind, not as a politician but as a friend offering silent support. The gate opened slowly and the sea of cameras surged forward. Questions were thrown like waves, about the meeting, about possible collaborations, about the visitor from the ministry. Sundar raised his hand gently, not to silence them with authority but to guide their attention. "Today is not about announcements or deals," he said in a calm, steady voice. "Today is about respect. I had the honor of hosting Minister Jaishankar in my home, not as a corporate leader but as a fellow Indian, as a family man. I ask you to allow us the dignity of this private moment." His tone was neither defensive nor arrogant. It carried sincerity, and for a brief moment even the reporters paused. Jaishankar stepped forward, adding a few kind words about the importance of human connections, respect, and family. The tension began to ease, if only slightly. But inside the house, Arun remained seated at the table, staring at the opened letter in Sundar's place. Something in his expression had shifted. Beneath the relief of finally being heard, there was a shadow, something unspoken that had not yet surfaced. His hands rested near the letter, his fingers tracing its edges slowly. Sundar returned after calming the situation outside, and as he walked back into the garden, he noticed Arun's distant look. "There's more, isn't there?" Sundar asked quietly. Arun looked up, his eyes heavy. "Yes," he whispered. "There's something you don't know, Something I didn't include in the letter. It's about what happened after my father sent it. The garden, moments ago filled with the warm scent of tea and flowers, suddenly felt colder. Sundar sensed that the letter was only the beginning of a deeper story, one that would test the meaning of loyalty and respect in ways he hadn't yet imagined. The hidden truth, the air in the garden seemed to thicken as Aaron's words hung between them, quiet yet heavy with meaning. Sundar leaned forward slightly, his brows furrowed, sensing that what was coming would peel back another layer of their shared past. Jaishankar remained still, his calm presence like a steady flame in a room growing colder. Sundar's wife and children had moved inside to give space, but the faint sounds of their voices drifted softly through the open doors, a reminder that this emotional moment was happening within the walls of a living, breathing home. Arun took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the letter that lay open on the table. After my father sent that letter, he began slowly, things got worse. Much worse. The betrayal wasn't just financial. The man who cheated us was someone we trusted deeply. He was like an uncle to me. After he took everything, he disappeared abroad, and we were left with nothing but unpaid loans and humiliation. My father tried to fight back legally, but the case dragged on for years. We were drowning, and in that chaos, something happened that I never told anyone outside my family. His hands trembled slightly as he clasped them together. My father fell ill. The stress broke him. He wasn't just a man who lost money. He was a man who had built everything from scratch, and when it all crumbled, so did he. I was still young, struggling to hold things together, and then one night, he passed away. Heart failure. I was alone at the hospital when it happened. His voice wavered, but he forced himself to continue. I didn't tell anyone from our college days. I couldn't face them. I couldn't face you. You were rising fast, your name was already being spoken with respect around the world, and I was burying my father with borrowed money. Sundar felt the weight of those words sink into his chest like a stone. The garden that had moments ago been bright now felt shrouded in quiet sorrow. He had been living his life, celebrating milestones, pushing the boundaries of technology, never realizing that someone who had once walked beside him was silently enduring the worst kind of loss. Guilt stirred inside him, not because he had intentionally ignored Arun, but because life had carried him so far, so fast, that he had never looked back to see who had fallen behind. Arun continued, his voice steadier now. After his death, I found out that the letter had been returned. It never reached you. It sat in a dusty drawer in our old house until I found it years later while clearing his things. By then, you were beyond my reach. I told myself it didn't matter anymore. I focused on surviving, even if it meant starting from the bottom again. But deep down, I always wondered what would have happened if that letter had reached you back then. Maybe things would have turned out differently for both of us. The silence that followed was deep and meaningful. Jaishankar finally spoke, his voice soft but firm. Life has a way of testing not just our strength but our ability to face unfinished stories, he said. Sometimes the most powerful conversations happen years after they should have. His words were not meant to assign blame, but to offer perspective. Sundar glanced at him with quiet gratitude. The minister's presence wasn't just political. It carried wisdom earned from witnessing countless human stories across borders and crises. Arun, Sundar said slowly, I can't change the past, but I can listen now. And I can act now. If you're here today, it's for a reason. Arun met his gaze, and for the first time a flicker of relief crossed his face. But before he could respond, a sudden commotion erupted near the front gate. Sundar's security team rushed to the side entrance, their radios crackling with urgency. One of the guards hurried toward the garden, whispering in Sundar's ear. The news was unexpected. A representative from a major international news outlet had arrived uninvited, claiming they had exclusive information about the meeting taking place at Sundar's residence. They were demanding a statement suggesting that something unusual was happening behind closed doors. Jaishankar rose to his feet, his diplomatic instincts sharp. It seems someone wants to turn this personal moment into a spectacle, he said evenly. The question is why? Sundar's mind began to race. The private lunch, the sudden media swarm, Arun's unexpected arrival, and now this escalation. It was all happening too fast. Something about it didn't feel like coincidence anymore. He exchanged a quick glance with his wife through the doorway. Her eyes reflected quiet concern but also trust in his judgment. He turned to Arun. Did anyone know you were coming here today? Arun shook his head firmly. No one. I didn't tell anyone, I just showed up. His honesty was clear, but the timing of everything made Sundar uneasy. The visit from the minister had been kept private for security and diplomatic reasons. For it to leak so quickly, and for a reporter to arrive with bold claims, suggested that someone had been watching closely. Jaishankar placed a reassuring hand on Sundar's shoulder. "Stay calm," he said. "When situations unfold like this, the key is to lead with truth, not fear. Let's bring everyone inside. We need to address this carefully." As they moved toward the living room, Arun followed behind, carrying the weight of both his personal revelations and the growing storm outside. Sundar's children peeked nervously from the staircase, sensing the shift in mood. Inside the house, the atmosphere was no longer just about a reunion between old friends. It had become something larger, an intersection of personal history, public scrutiny, and the values that defined how Sundar would navigate this moment. They gathered near the large dining table, the same place where laughter and warm conversation had filled the air earlier. Now the soft ticking of the wall clock was the loudest sound in the room. Jaishankar stood with quiet authority. Sundar's wife held their children close, and Arun placed the letter gently on the table once more, as if it were the silent heart of everything that was unfolding. "The truth," Jaishankar said slowly, as a way of coming to light at the most unexpected times. "What matters now is how we face it." Sundar looked around the room, realizing that the day had shifted from a warm visit to a pivotal moment. One that would test his character not in a boardroom or a stage, but in his own home. Outside, the crowd was growing. Inside, the past and present were colliding, and somewhere between the noise at the gates and the letter on the table, a decision was waiting to be made, one that would define everything that followed. The choice before the storm, the living room had turned into a quiet battlefield of thoughts. The sounds outside grew louder, reporters calling out Sundar's name, their words echoing faintly through the hallways like distant thunder before a storm. Inside, every face carried a different weight. Arun's eyes held the pain of his past and the uncertainty of his sudden involvement in something bigger. Sundar's wife stood protectively near their children, her presence both calm and alert, and Jaishankar stood with an unspoken authority that made the room feel both grounded and tense at the same time. Sundar took a slow breath as he stood near the window, watching the crowd beyond the gate. A few journalists were holding microphones toward the house, hoping to catch something through the open air. Flashbulbs went off sporadically, lighting the quiet street in bursts. The moment that had begun with warmth and shared respect was now teetering on the edge of public scrutiny. He turned away from the window and looked back at the people inside his home, the people who mattered most in this moment. "We can't keep them out forever," Sundar said quietly. "They've already sensed that something unusual is happening here. If I stay silent, they'll create their own story, but if I speak, I have to be careful. One wrong word and this personal moment could become tomorrow's headline." Jaishankar nodded slowly. "This is what happens when private lives intersect with public expectations," he replied. "But remember, Sundar, your voice carries weight not because of your title, but because people believe it reflects integrity. The truth will always protect you better than crafted appearances." His words settled deep within Sundar. Throughout his career, he had faced countless interviews, board meetings, and public appearances. But this was different. This wasn't a stage set by professionals, it was his home, his family, and now his past standing together in a single room. Arun shifted uneasily. "If my being here is making things worse, I can leave," he said softly, lowering his gaze. "I didn't want to drag you into something like this. I just wanted to talk to you face to face. After all these years." Sundar walked closer to him and placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Arun, you're not making things worse," he said. "The world outside may see chaos, but inside, this is real. This is life. I won't let fear push someone from my past out of the door just to make things look neat." His voice was calm but firm. It wasn't the voice of a global executive addressing a crowd. It was the voice of a friend reclaiming a bond that time had buried. Jaishankar observed the moment with quiet approval. He had spent decades navigating diplomatic storms, but what he witnessed here was something more personal and powerful. Leadership not through authority, but through empathy. "The reporters outside," Jaishankar added, "they're not the real challenge. The challenge is deciding how much of your truth you're willing to share. Because once you step outside that door, this story will no longer belong only to you." Sundar understood the gravity of that statement. He glanced at the letter on the table, the fragile piece of history that had triggered everything. It wasn't just a letter anymore. It was a bridge between past and present, between two men whose lives had diverged and unexpectedly converged again on this day. He turned toward his family. His wife met his gaze with unwavering support. "Whatever you choose," she said softly. "We'll stand with you. Just remember, the story they tell out there doesn't have to define what happens in here." Her words anchored him. Sundar straightened his posture and looked at Jaishankar. "I want to face them," he said finally. "But I don't want to give them a spectacle. I want to give them something real, something they won't twist into drama." Jaishankar gave a faint smile. "Then speak with your heart. It's harder to twist sincerity than rehearsed lines." As Sundar prepared to step outside again, one of his security officers entered hurriedly. "Sir, there's a rumor spreading online," he said. "Some outlets are claiming that today's meeting involves a secret collaboration between you and the government. They're speculating wildly, the crowd's getting bigger." The situation was escalating faster than anyone anticipated. Sundar knew that if he didn't act now, the narrative would spiral out of his control. He walked toward the entrance, but just before reaching the door, he stopped and turned back to Arun. "When I speak, I'll speak the truth," he said. "And part of that truth is that today wasn't planned to be anything more than a meeting of respect and friendship. And you being here, that's part of that story too." Arun looked stunned for a moment. "You'd mention me? Why not?" Sundar replied. "You were part of my past, and today you reminded me of something I should never forget. Where I came from, and the people who shared that journey with me." A silence filled the room, but it wasn't the uncomfortable kind. It was the silence that comes when something meaningful is about to happen. Jaishankar gave a slight nod, signaling that he would stand beside Sundar as he addressed the crowd. The front door opened slowly, the afternoon light spilled across the marble floor, and the sound of clicking cameras intensified. Sundar stepped forward, not as the CEO everyone recognized, but as a man ready to speak his truth. Jaishankar stood beside him, and behind them, through the open door, a glimpse of his family could be seen, steady, united. The reporters shouted questions all at once, but Sundar raised his hand gently, the same way he had earlier. The noise died down, drawn in by his calm presence. "I understand there are many questions," he began, his voice clear and sincere. "Today was not a business meeting, not a political event. It was a visit rooted in respect. Minister Jaishankar honored my home with his presence, and our conversation was personal, meaningful, and deeply human. Sometimes not everything significant happens in conference rooms or press briefings. Sometimes it happens over a simple meal at home." The crowd grew quieter. Even the clicking of cameras slowed. "Someone from my past also visited me today," he continued. "Someone who reminded me that behind every achievement, there are friendships, memories, and stories that shape who we become. That's what today is about. Respect for where we come from, gratitude for the people who walk with us, and honesty about the journey that brings us here." It wasn't a speech prepared by a team of experts. It was raw, honest, and spoken straight from the heart. Jaishankar added a few thoughtful words about the value of humility and shared human bonds, reinforcing the message rather than overpowering it. As Sundar stepped back inside, the reporters didn't disperse immediately, but their tone had changed. What had started as a hungry pursuit of a secret story had become something softer, an acknowledgement that sometimes the truth is simple and beautiful. Inside the house, Arun stood still, his eyes moist. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered. Sundar smiled gently. "Maybe not. But sometimes the right thing isn't what's expected. It's what's needed." But just as the room began to breathe again, one of the security officers returned with a worried expression. "Sir," he said cautiously, "someone in the crowd slipped a note through the gate. It's addressed to you and to him." He pointed at Arun. The note was small, folded neatly, but something about its timing and delivery sent a shiver through the room. Sundar reached for it slowly, feeling the weight of another unexpected twist waiting to unfold. The note that changed everything. The folded note felt strangely heavy in Sundar's hand, even though it was just a thin piece of paper. The crowd outside was beginning to disperse slowly after his heartfelt address, but a quiet tension lingered at the gate. The security officer who had handed over the note stood nearby, watchful as if sensing that this wasn't an ordinary message. Jaishankar moved closer, his calm eyes narrowing slightly in curiosity while Arun shifted uneasily beside the table, unsure of what new storm this piece of paper might carry. Sundar unfolded the note carefully, The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant yet hurried as if the writer had been pressed for time. He began reading silently, but after a few lines his expression changed subtly, a mixture of surprise and concern flickering across his face. He read it again more slowly, making sure he wasn't misinterpreting the words. "What does it say?" Arun asked softly, his voice uncertain. Sundar looked up, his gaze moving between Arun Jaishankar and his family. "It's strange," he said slowly. "It's addressed to both of us. It says someone knows about what happened years ago, about the betrayal your father faced, and it mentions details that were never made public." A chill ran down Arun's spine. "That's not possible," he whispered. "Those details were only known to my father, me, and the man who cheated us. No one else." Jaishankar reached out his hand. "May I see it?" Sundar passed him the note. The minister read it with the same calm precision he brought to delicate negotiations. After a moment, he looked up. "This wasn't written by a journalist fishing for a story," he said. "This is written by someone who knows, and they want something in return." Sundar frowned. "What do you mean?" "Here," Jaishankar said, pointing to the last line. The words were simple but chilling. "If you want the truth to stay buried, meet me tomorrow at the old Riverside Cafe at dusk. Come alone." The room fell silent. The cafe mentioned was a place Sundar hadn't visited in decades. It was near their old college, a quiet spot where he and Arun had spent countless evenings dreaming about the future. For someone to choose that location meant they understood the emotional weight of their shared past. Arun's face turned pale. "This has to be him," he murmured. "The man who betrayed us. He disappeared after everything collapsed. What if he's back?" Jaishankar considered this carefully. "It's possible," he said. "But what's more important is the timing. Why now? Why send this note during a visit that was supposed to be private? This wasn't random. Someone has been watching closely, waiting for the right moment to resurface." Sundar placed the note gently on the table and sat down, pressing his fingers against his forehead. The day had begun with warmth, then drifted into emotional revelation, public attention, and now it had arrived at a new layer, one that tied together his friend's painful past and his own present. "They're trying to use the past as leverage," Sundar said slowly. "But why involve me? I wasn't part of that betrayal." "Because your name carries weight now," Jaishankar replied. "To them, your involvement could mean attention, money, or influence. Or perhaps," and he paused, "they know something even deeper that connects you both." Those words made both Sundar and Arun exchange uneasy glances. Arun hesitated before speaking. "There's one thing I never told you," he admitted. "The man who betrayed us. He was an investor who initially wanted to fund a joint project between us. Back in college, when we were working on that early idea together, he approached me first. He said he admired both of us but thought I was easier to influence. After everything fell apart, I always wondered if he had tried to reach you too. Maybe you don't remember, but if he had, maybe he kept something."